Hello, everyone. This is Luke Thomas. I'm the co-founder of Friday, and I want to take some time to talk about one-on-ones. As an employee, I've found that one-on-ones are a fantastic way to get to know the people that I work with, and to be able to share issues with my boss on a regular basis. The worst jobs I've ever had in the past were places that did not implement and have regular one-on-ones, and the best places I've ever worked did. It's such a huge deal. So I wanted to record a video and go over two things. The first is kind of a high-level overview of one-on-ones and how they work, and then dive into how you could set up a one-on-one template or workflow in Friday. So I'll make it so that you can jump ahead to how to set these up, but let's jump right into how these work. So here's a quick overview. One-on-ones are a way to catch potential problems and are a great way to build better relationships with the people that you work with. As a leader, having regular one-on-ones and having this regular feedback loop helps you understand the nuance of a particular role. It's also a high leverage activity for team leaders because by spending 20 minutes to a half hour, it can have an impact on an employee and the way that they work for weeks, right? And so if you're a manager, the output of your output as a manager is the output that your team has. So it's really important that you use your time effectively, and one-on-ones are a great way to do that. I would argue if you aren't holding regular one-on-ones, you're probably failing in your job as a leader. I just think they're that important. So let's dive into a quick history of the one-on-one. Long story short, Andy Grove, the CEO of Intel, talked a lot about it in his book, High Output Management. I strongly recommend, if you have not read this book, it's a must-have. It's probably the number one book on managing and leading I've ever found. And he goes into a decent amount of detail on the idea of a one-on-one. And the one-on-one he talks about in his book, the kind of founding of this cadence was a byproduct of meeting up with an employee and trying to understand kind of what their day-to-day was like. So as a team leader, he felt like he didn't really understand what was going on or the day-to-day of a particular employee. So he went, and it was kind of like a question and answer or a teaching session, and that habit stuck. Fast forward 30 years, 40 years, this process is very prevalent in technology companies. It's a great process to have. So that's kind of that quick history. Like I said, strongly recommend you pick up High Output Management. Why should you have one-on-ones? It's a really good question. Like I mentioned briefly before, it's a great way to get to know the people that report to you if you're a manager. What I really like about a one-on-one is that it allows you to understand not only the nuance of a role, but also of the employee, right? How do they like to work? Because one employee is going to work in a different way than another. And a one-on-one is a great way to process a lot of data about a particular individual that helps you get better at working with them. Like I said earlier, it's a high leverage activity relative to the amount of time you invest. Also, because one-on-ones are private between an employee and a manager or team leader, this private nature of the conversation allows them to be more honest than they would be in something like a team meeting. So in a lot of team meetings, you'll have someone who is just a lot more gregarious or outgoing than others, and they have the tendency to kind of take over. An issue with that is that oftentimes you have kind of the more introverted people or the quieter people, they don't feel comfortable speaking up, and they especially don't feel comfortable speaking up in front of, 3 or 4 of their peers, right? So this one-to-one nature of a one-on-one meeting allows them to be a bit more honest than they would be in those team meetings. And as a manager, it's a way to nudge and create those constant feedback loops, right? So if someone is kind of starting to carry off on a different track, this is a way to kind of rein them in, so to speak, right? And the only way that this happens is because there's a constant feedback loop. So if there's an issue or if there's something that needs to be addressed, you can catch that potential problem earlier. Let's talk about the one-on-one guidelines. So I would recommend 30-minute minimum. In the High Output Management book, Andy Grove talks about having them be an hour. It's certainly, the reasoning is pretty simple, and it's that oftentimes it kind of takes some time to get people to open up about what's actually going on. And so oftentimes, 25, 30 minutes in, the employee starts kind of telling you things because they feel comfortable, right? And so what I would recommend, and the reason why I recommend 30 minutes, is because you can actually get some of this honesty if you ask them for an agenda beforehand, or if you kind of gauge their sentiment beforehand. So instead of walking into a one-on-one meeting, and trying to prod and to figure out what's actually going on. Oftentimes, if the employee creates the agenda, they can hint at things in that agenda that they want to talk about. This is one thing I've learned as a manager. Next fact, these should be regularly scheduled, right? It needs to be a cadence. It needs to be a habit. Also, as I mentioned, the employee needs to prepare an agenda beforehand. This is because it's the employee's meeting. It's not your meeting as a team leader. And this is a really, really important distinction. This is not a chance where you can, beat someone over the head with, their performance as of late. This is a way where you are taking in information as a leader and kind of poking around and trying to really figure out what's going on, as well as kind of coming to some conclusions about how you can make their life and work better for them. You also should take notes and should share a recap. And the reason why is because taking notes implies some level of commitment, right? If you're just kind of spilling all these important things about work and I'm not taking notes, it kind of begs the question, will they actually do anything? Versus if someone take notes, it implies that they're actually going to do something about it, or at least they care enough to take notes. And a final guideline, if you're the manager, avoid rescheduling these meetings. If they're the employee's meeting and you are constantly rescheduling things, that shows kind of a lack of respect for a meeting that the employee owns. Next, what questions should you ask? So I would approach a one-on-one almost like a therapist might approach kind of a therapy session. So the employee dictates the agenda items. It's your job to kind of figure out what's actually going on. And you could use something like the Socratic method, which is kind of continually asking why, to figure out and to kind of pinpoint the root cause issue. I, as an employee, many times have told my boss, hey, I don't really know what the right answer is here, but I'm kind of expressing what I'm feeling or how I'm thinking, because maybe it can help me come up with a better conclusion about how I need to get certain work done or how I need to work with others. Here are a couple questions you can ask. So, what is one thing I can do to make your life better at work, right? If you're a team leader and you ask this, it gives you an instantly actionable way to make someone's life better. The next could be, where would you like to be in 6 months or a year? This kind of seeks to figure out what their kind of career aspirations are in the short term. And so if you figure out those and you want to help them, well, then you can create a roadmap around their answer to this question. The next thing is kind of what daily activities give you energy and what daily activities drain you, right? So what you're trying to do is figure out these activities that people really enjoy doing and the ones that, are just sucking the life out of them. While you can't probably remove all activities that drain someone at work, there is definitely probably some ways that you can make someone's life better. And as a result, they're going to be more excited to have one-on-ones because you're actually helping them. Finally, let's talk a little bit about roadblocks to having one-on-ones. So the honest truth is that it can be awkward at first, especially with people you don't know very well. And so unfortunately, you just kind of have to ignore some of these feelings because over time, it becomes much, much easier. It can also be difficult to coordinate schedules. Many people I know will schedule all their one-on-ones on a Thursday afternoon, for example. If you have a lot of direct reports, it can be time consuming. So, if you have 10 direct reports, you probably should have fewer direct reports. But yeah, this can be time consuming. If it's a half an hour with, 10 people or 8 people, that can take a significant time of your day. But once again, it's a high leverage activity. And then sometimes people feel obligated to have these meetings, even if they aren't useful. So one guideline I forgot to mention is that you should figure out the cadence according to the individual and how comfortable they feel with their role in their day-to-day activities. And so the reason why is because if someone's new at work, if you hired them 2 weeks ago, you probably should have one-on-one every week. But if you work with someone who is very autonomous, doesn't really need a lot of help, maybe you should do that once every couple weeks instead, right? So I would encourage you, if you're a team leader, make it known that if an employee doesn't necessarily want to have a one-on-one, they can cancel it. It's their meeting. With that being said, if someone continues to cancel, that may be an early indicator that there's something wrong. We help you create structure and process to the way that you communicate. And that could be a one-on-one meeting, a weekly status update, top-down update from the CEO. It's really up to you about how you want to do it. But we really think that adding structure and some process and regularity to the way that you communicate really helps make work better. So in this example, I've set up a sample one-on-one meeting template. You can see I've given it a name for this employee, James, given it an icon and a purpose. So the purpose with the one-on-one meeting template is to collect an agenda item or many agenda items before we end up meeting. So you can see here I've set up the schedule to run bi-weekly at Tuesday or on Tuesday at 9 a.m. So let's say we have a Wednesday one-on-one meeting at 9 a.m. I'm sending this 24 hours beforehand so that I can collect agenda items with enough time before we meet. Then you can see that in our question builder, we have a couple questions. How are you feeling? Which is an emoji question. And then what would you like to discuss in our one-on-one? And just so you know, this is what the emoji question looks like. So this is a way of gauging sentiment. I mentioned previously in the video that oftentimes it takes a lot of time in a one-on-one to get an understanding of how people are feeling. But if you ask a question beforehand, it can give you this really healthy sense of kind of how much digging you need to do. We also have the ability to send kudos or submit suggestions, which are power-ups, but we're just going to skip over those for now. But it's essentially a way to just do things that you would not normally do, right? If there's no prompt to say thank you, you probably won't do it, but when you have a prompt, you will. That's why power-ups exist in Friday. Next step is picking the respondents. So in this example, James is my direct report. He needs to complete the workflow, right? Because it's the employee's meeting. So he's putting together the agenda. He's sharing how he's feeling, and he is able to see his results, and I am able to see his results as well. Finally, then we determine what prompt or what channel the workflow is run over. So it could be email or it could be sent directly in Slack. So we also have a reminder that's sent out 4 hours. So if they don't, fill it out at 9 a.m., they might get a final reminder a few hours later, simply because we really need those agenda items to be able to be efficient with the one-on-one meeting. And we also have the ability to set up a notification, so you could push this over DM in Slack, or you could just get an email as well. So as the agenda items roll in, they will show up under the feed, and you will be able to see a running log of the history of responses. So that's in a nutshell how you can set up a one-on-one using Friday. We power a lot more communication workflows, but I hope this was helpful for you.